Hello, my name is William Peary. Despite years of exploration of the history of covert operations, I fell victim to the huge hoax. I accepted the officially approved conspiracy theory that Muslim fanatics conspired and attacked us on 9/11 as the truth. But in the fall of 2005, I encountered a huge body of evidence that proved the official story to be a public myth, a web of big lies. It may be that Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda had the motive for 9/11, but they surely didn't have the means or opportunity to plant the explosives in the World Trade Centers. But if they didn't plan the attack, who did? The great detectives used their imagination to discern the truth by creating alternative scenarios and discerning which of the scenarios best matches the evidence. After talking to hundreds of people about 9/11, I've observed that many people find it easy to imagine Muslim fanatics doing all sorts of horrific deeds. But when it comes to neoconservatives doing bad things, they appear to be imagination impaired. This video is intended to assist the imagination impaired. There are so many things and events for which I'm not certain where the truth lies. I feel the critical thing for me to do is to be diligent in identifying and removing that which is not truth from my mind. I would love to get my hands on the transcripts for the strategy meetings for the Project for the New American Century think tank, but unfortunately that isn't possible because of the neoconservatives' obsession with secrecy. We will never know who said what at their planning meetings. The following is my speculation of the types of things the planners might have said, other than Zelikow's Catastrophic Terrorism, Imagining the Transformative Event, from the November-December 1998 issue of Foreign Affairs magazine. I am quite literally putting my words into their mouths. The main conditions that enable the effectiveness of psychological warfare is that the subject is unaware that he or she is being manipulated. I pray that this video will raise awareness and protect people from the destructive effects of psychological warfare.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that we are all here, this strategy and planning meeting for December 10th of the year 1998 of the Project for the New American Century think tank will now come to order. So Dick, what is on the agenda for us to talk about today? There is only one item on the agenda today. How do we bring Pax Americana and global hegemony to the world? In other words, how do we gain more control over the sea, the land, the air, outer space, the infosphere, and cyberspace? How do we achieve full-spectrum military dominance of the planet? The same thing we always talk about here at PNAC. And we will bring world peace, just as soon as those rogue nations learn to accept American leadership.
I was reminiscing of the good old days of the Cold War. The fear and hatred were so intense you could cut it with a knife. We made it appear as if there were commie sleeper cells everywhere just waiting for the signal to take over, killing or enslaving everyone. It was so easy, all we had to do was constantly exaggerate the Soviet Union's military capabilities, and we were perceived as heroic saviors, standing between them and a horrific fate at the hands of the godless commies. The sheeple worshipped us. Don't get me wrong, corrupting China and destroying the Soviet Union was a fantastic accomplishment of which we can all be very proud, but I really miss having the frightening Red Chinese and terrifying Soviet Union around.
I remember when I was Secretary of Defense, I announced that the Soviet Union had developed super-stealth submarine technology that rendered its new submarines completely invisible to our sonar, and suggested that one could be sitting on the bottom of Long Island Sound, loaded to the gills with big nukes just waiting for the signal to annihilate 100 American cities at a moment's notice, and that there was no way for us to know until it was too late. Of course it was completely fraudulent, a fabrication, but it sure created a lot of fear. Ladies and gentlemen, I just returned from the Aspen Strategy Group seminar at which our friend Philip Zelikow presented a very exciting concept for the creation of a new public myth that could advance our globalist agenda. I took the liberty of inviting Philip Zelikow and our old friend Condoleezza, who was the first to recognize Zelikow's cunning brilliance, to join our meeting today.
Gentlemen, my good friend and mentor Philip Zelikow earned his Ph.D. in history with a doctoral dissertation on the creation and maintenance of public myth. He worked for the State Department during the 1980s. He is the director of the Aspen Strategy Group think tank. We both began working at the National Security Council on the same day in '89. He was always educating me on the strategies the great rulers employed to receive the devotion of their subjects. We worked closely together during the Bush administration, and we left the NSC within 24 hours of each other in 1991. We co-authored a book, Germany Unified and Europe Transformed. He wrote a book on the Kennedy tapes and another book on why people don't trust the government. While at Harvard, he wrote about the use and creative misuse of history in policymaking. As noted in his words, contemporary history is defined functionally by those critical people and events that go into forming the public's presumptions about its immediate past. The idea of public presumption is akin to the notion of public myth, but without the negative implications sometimes invoked by the word myth. Such presumptions, or beliefs thought to be true although not necessarily known with certainty, and shared in common with the relevant political community.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 6 years we've been out of power. Why did the marketing strategy that performed so fantastically in past elections fail to win brand loyalty in the last 2 elections? Because our target audience was not buying the Ronald Reagan rugged cowboy with the 6 guns blazing brand marketing strategy that we were utilizing. Because brand loyalty was dependent on there being a public presumption of a terrifying evil empire. There is a remedy to the evil empire shortage that will win back our brand loyalty. I have dedicated half of my life to researching the marketing strategies utilized by the great rulers in branding their subjects throughout recorded history. A popular theme is to convince your subjects that you are a living God or a close relative of God. In the time of Jesus, Caesar Augustus, son of Zeus, minted Roman coins saying, "Son of God," as a reminder to his subjects. In modern times, being divinely guided has proven to be effective. For example, Joseph Goebbels orchestrated a marketing campaign that convinced the Germans that Hitler was a very deeply religious man and that his inspiration to destroy the forces of evil arose from his study of the Bible. Hitler proclaimed the need for the revival of the Christian faith across his nation, what he called a new Christianity. To emphasize the faith basis of his movement, every man in the German army wore a belt buckle that declared, "God is with us." Hitler outlawed abortion, raged a death war on all homosexuals. Pope Pius XII was so impressed by his high Christian moral values that he encouraged Catholics to support Hitler. The most innovative approach is to manufacture emotional neediness and then convince your target population that only your brand will satisfy. For example, first covertly create an atmosphere that will lead to an epidemic of low self-esteem within your target population. Then you associate your brand with the message, "You are special. America is #1 in the world." Print 100 million Power of Pride bumper stickers. You are smarter, morally superior to those other people. We are the master society. Why, compared to you, those others are nothing, merely cockroaches. Flattery will get you everywhere. Remember this successful sales pitch? You are God's chosen master race. You're superior in every way to those non-Aryans. It worked wonders in searing the Germans with the Third Reich brand of fascism. Under conditions in which it is easy to incur debt, a large portion of the target population has to work overtime to avoid falling deeper into debt. Constantly associating the brand with economic prosperity and freedom renders the brand irresistibly seductive, even as civil liberties are slowly being removed. But the ultimate scheme to guarantee fierce brand loyalty is to covertly induce perceptions of impending catastrophe, plant the right misinformation, and let their imaginations run amok. Then market the brand as an all-powerful father figure willing to move heaven and earth to protect his children. And what better way to induce intense anxiety than to clandestinely start a war? Throughout history, the great leaders have covertly humiliated and antagonized weaker nations until they do something stupid that can be used to demonize them and to justify going to war. If there are no nations foolish enough to attack a stronger force, there is a fallback scheme, which is to covertly stage an attack or the appearance of an attack on one's own homeland, then cleverly framing a weaker nation or an internal group for doing the dastardly deed. I have located hundreds of examples of false flag attacks in history. An impressive example of a false flag attack to develop brand loyalty, which is now known to have been orchestrated by Hermann Göring and Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda. It occurred on the night of February 27, 1933, less than a month after the Nazis assumed power, with dismal approval ratings. It was the burning of the Reichstag, home of Germany's parliament. The fire was started by members of the stormtroopers. When an aide brought Hitler word that the nation's most prestigious building was ablaze, he rushed to the scene, called a press conference. Standing in front of the burned-out building, surrounded by nation's media, he proclaimed, "You are now witnessing the beginning of a great new epoch in history. This fire," he said with his voice trembling with emotion, "is the beginning." He used the occasion, a sign from God he called it, to declare all-out war on terrorism and its ideological sponsors. The Nazis then blamed the arson on the German Communist Party, claiming that the fire was intended to be a signal for a communist uprising. The only evidence the Nazis presented for this claim was the discovery on the site of Marinus van der Lubbe, a feeble-minded left-wing radical from Holland who was evidently brought to the site by the stormtroopers. The Reichstag fires then became the justification for unparalleled persecution of the communists and the social democratic workers, liberals, and intellectuals. Thousands of people who were allied with those workers' movements were arrested, all left-wing newspapers were shut down, and the so-called fire decrees annulled the civil rights provided by the Constitution of the Weimar Republic. These decrees formulated the pseudo-legal basis for the entire Nazi dictatorship. The fire also supplied justification for the formation of the Office for the Security of the Homeland. In German, it is Geheimstaatspolizei, which was abbreviated to Gestapo, and its Schutzstaffel, known simply by the agency's infamous initials, the SS. 6 years later, a marketing campaign was launched selling the invasion of Poland as a defensive measure. The campaign was named after the Chief of Homeland Security, Heinrich Himmler. Operation Himmler began on August 31st of 1939. German soldiers from the Sicherheitsdienst, or SD, took control of the radio station. Dressed in Polish uniforms, they made anti-German pronouncements in Polish. The newspapers carried photos of what appeared to be dead Polish soldiers that had invaded the homeland. In reality, dead concentration camp prisoners dressed in Polish military uniforms that the German soldiers had left behind to make it look like an act of Polish aggression. In the early hours of the next morning, the Germans began their invasion with 52 divisions containing over 1.8 million soldiers pushing into Poland on 3 fronts. Hitler's propaganda ministry placed huge significance on the anti-Semitic literary forgery The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, first published in 1903 in Russia. The protocols take the form of a speech describing a Jewish conspiracy to achieve world domination by controlling the banking system and the mass media. Hitler launched a campaign that blamed the Jews for all the misfortunes that had befallen Germany. From the loss of the First World War to the Treaty of Versailles to the hyperinflation of 1923 that caused tremendous suffering, it was all a result of an alleged international Jewish attempt to bring Germany to her knees. The result was intense victim consciousness. The German people presumed that they were caught in a life-and-death struggle for survival and reacted in the predictable way by rallying behind the Nazi parties as if their lives depended on it. It appeared to the German people that the fascists had the solution to every problem facing the homeland. Now, on to my solution for our terrifying enemy shortage. Let me read a selection from my article published in the current issue of Foreign Affairs magazine entitled Catastrophic Terrorism, subtitled Imagining the Transformative Event. An act of catastrophic terrorism that killed thousands or tens of thousands of people and or disrupted the necessities of life for hundreds of thousands or even millions. A successful attack with weapons of mass destruction could certainly take thousands or tens of thousands of lives. If the device that exploded in 1993 under the World Trade Centers had been nuclear or had effectively dispersed a deadly pathogen, the resulting horror and chaos would have exceeded our abilities to describe it. Such an act of catastrophic terrorism would be a watershed event in American history. It could involve a loss of life and property unprecedented in peacetime and undermine America's fundamental sense of security, as did the Soviet bomb test in 1949. Like Pearl Harbor, this event would divide past and future into before and after. The United States might respond with draconian measures, scaling back civil liberties, allowing wider surveillance of civilians, detention of suspects, and the use of deadly force. More violence would follow, either as other terrorists seek to imitate the great success, or as the United States strikes out at those considered responsible. In the public relations and advertising industry, the mantra is, perception is reality. The exciting outcome of which is that by putting the proper spin on events, and by secretly orchestrating deceptive events that feed dark fantasies, which in turn trigger powerful emotional reactions, we can effectively recreate reality in a way that better serves our agenda. I really like this idea of staging a new Pearl Harbor surprise attack on America. Oh, the fear and hatred that could be generated. But who should we frame this time? The FBI gave explosives and detonators through an informant to the blind cleric and his followers for their truck bomb that they detonated under the World Trade Center in '93. I think Islamic fundamentalists would be an excellent choice for a scapegoat this time. There are millions of Muslims living among us in the USA, and more than 1 billion worldwide. They are everywhere. Just imagine the public presumption of the enemy within and the enemy without. This could be presented as an epic clash between Christian and Islamic culture. But how do we convince the people that the bombs were planted by Islamic fundamentalists? In the military, we have practiced war games in which hijacked airliners are crashed into important buildings by suicide bombers. Just think of how the people would identify with the last horrific moments of all those innocent passengers. The hatred of Muslims would be so intense that hundreds of thousands of young men and women will line up at military recruiting stations, willing to go fight and die, hungry for payback time. I can see it. Tens of thousands of the whiz kids we need to operate all of our new high-tech weapon systems, not only more dimwits. One of the main foundations that Americans draw our sense of security from is our vast global military infrastructure. People presume that because of the Pentagon's enormous inventory of weapons of mass destruction, that no one would dare do anything to annoy the U.S. A false flag attack on the World Trade Centers, the symbol of America's economic dominance of the world, will be a very effective psychological warfare op. But if what we are trying to do is to destroy America's fundamental sense of security, it would seem that a false flag attack on the symbol of America's military world dominance could be very helpful, demonstrating that America's military has become weak and vulnerable as a consequence of 8 years of neglect by the Clinton administration, exhibiting the need for vastly increased budget in order to make us safe once more, of course.
Fantastic idea. Let's blow up part of the Pentagon, say that the hijacked airliner hit it. The notion that our global military will protect us if they can't even protect their own headquarters will be demolished. All my defense contractor friends will be dancing with glee.
But what if a hot jet fighter jock intercepts the hijacked airliner and stops it from getting to its target? Not a problem. In 2 years we'll be back in power at the White House, where I can arrange multiple overlapping war games, with plenty of phantom blips on the radar screens, and most of the interceptors will be well out of the way. The military air controllers won't know which way to send the few remaining interceptors left behind. I think turning airliners into kamikaze guided missiles is a fantastic idea, but where are we going to find a group of men willing to fly airliners into the World Trade Centers for us?
No need to find suicide hijackers. We have the technology. There are many ways of creating the appearance of airliners being hijacked. We could have the airliners land at a remote military airstrip and replace it with a look-alike drone aircraft that would crash into the towers. Or we could arrange to have the cabin filled with carbon dioxide, rendering the passengers and crew unconscious, at which point the autopilot would be programmed to take over the controls, flying the airliner through a sequence of GPS waypoints, the last waypoint being at the center of the target tower. The main advantage of exchanging a look-alike drone aircraft is that it would be easier to install an incendiary device that would ensure ignition of the atomized fuel, creating a dramatic image of a huge fireball the shape of Satan's head erupting from a wounded building. We should also arrange to have fake phone calls made to the family members of the supposed passengers, saying things like, "Our airplane has been taken over by men with box cutters and a bomb. If I never see you again, I just wanted to say I love you one last time." Using that voice morphing technology device that Los Alamos invented to sound like the appropriate passengers. This would enhance the sheeple identifying with all those poor innocent passengers on the airplanes.
All these plans for creating a perception of airliners filled with helpless people crashing into skyscrapers and large fireballs the shape of Satan's head erupting from jagged wounded buildings are all quite shocking images. But if we want to build up Osama bin Laden as an international boogeyman, a phantom menace, and replace the communists with Al-Qaeda in order to gain widespread support for major wars against Muslim countries, we're going to need some more extreme shock and awe scorched into the people's heads. But perhaps airliners crashing into skyscrapers could be useful in order to get the nation's attention focused. The problem is that modern skyscrapers are designed to withstand airline crashes without collapsing. But what if instead of a nuclear bomb, as Philip suggested, we arrange to have thousands of small, high-temperature incendiary devices planted in all the vertical support beams, each device with its own radio receiver waiting for its coded signal to melt through the beam? If they are detonated in sequence, it would sound more like a roar than an explosion. And there could be really big devices in the sub-basements, the sound of which could be masked if they are detonated at the moment that the aircraft strikes the building or when the building is collapsing. The images of the Twin Towers, the symbol of America's economic dominance of the world, falling out of the sky will have a powerfully traumatic shock and awe effect on the sheeple. We will have the corporate news media proclaim that the damage from the aircraft combined with raging infernos started by the jet fuel melted the steel frame, causing the towers to collapse, with thousands yet trapped inside. A cold-blooded act of mass murder carried out by the evil Islamo-fascist. Remember to tell the corporate news media to show the images of the Twin Towers falling out of the sky every 2 or 3 minutes for days afterwards to maximize the psychological effect. I will consult with my explosives and demolition experts that I've worked with in the past. Since the Bush family is in charge of security for these buildings, access will be no problem. I will report back to the group regarding the feasibility of imploding the World Trade Center towers in a way that is not too obvious.
Torture centers are extremely useful to limit resistance and dissent. Philip, when you say we could respond with draconian measures, do you think that torture centers could be justified using this psychological operation? Absolutely. Simply pose this hypothetical scenario. If you had a terrorist in custody, and you know that he has planted a time bomb that is going to go off killing thousands of innocent people, but he won't tell you where it is, do you torture him? After this psyops, everyone will say, of course you do. But we may set up the first torture centers offshore to let the people get accustomed to the idea before opening centers in the homeland. Remember that after the original Pearl Harbor event, the government rounded up all people of Japanese ancestry living on the West Coast and held them in internment camps until the end of the war. This was completely unconstitutional, but the Supreme Court ruled that it was justified under the circumstances. I believe that we will enjoy similar attitudes after a similar event.
I just thought of the perfect date for this psyops. We desire to set up a military police state, and we want the sheeple to accept it, even beg for it. What number are the sheeple conditioned to call when in a state of panic and they want help from the government? They call 911, and the firemen, the paramedics, and the police come and take care of the problem for them. Remember always to emphasize the heroism of the firemen and policemen killed by those terrorists while courageously doing their best to save lives. September 11th will have the perfect psychological effect. September 11th of 2001, of course, when we were back in power at the White House.
Gentlemen, I hate to be a party pooper, but what if evidence leaks out that this 9/11 PSYOPs event was not directed by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden? If it becomes apparent that it was an inside job, won't we all be hanged for high treason?
Don't worry about that. The sheeple have been conditioned to believe whatever we, the authority figures, tell them to believe. After the JFK assassination, there was a lot of doubt of the official story. Let's face it, it was a messy op. But our predecessors simply set up the Warren Commission to cover up all the troubling facts. They created the magic bullet explanation, and the problem went away. Remember the Oklahoma City PSYOP event? Everybody jumped to the conclusion that Islamic fundamentalists did it. No one wanted to believe that fellow Americans could do such a horrific thing to innocent women and children. We will simply supply plenty of artificial evidence to reinforce what they wanted to believe in the first place. They will eat it up, hook, line, and sinker, and beg for more. The grieving families will be in the spotlight, and they could cause trouble by asking difficult questions. But if the government paid each family a couple $1 million in compensation, if they sign an agreement banning them from suing the government or the airlines for further compensation, we should be sure not to call it hush money.
Ladies and gentlemen, the event that we are proposing to orchestrate will induce post-traumatic shock and awe syndrome of varying degrees of severity in hundreds of millions of sheeple. When an innocent witnesses a horrific, intentional, cold-blooded deed in which thousands of other sheeple are burned or crushed to death, it is similar to being thrown into a rushing river, being tossed and pulled by powerful emotions. Desperate for something solid to cling to, they will enter what a hypnotist would call a super-suggestive state. Hungry for comforting explanation to give meaning to the whole experience, this is when we throw them the rope in the form of pre-scripted news reports. News reports that they will cling on to for dear life. Attack on America! America under siege! America is attacked by evil Islamo-fascists with box cutters. The Islamic fundamentalists hate us not for anything bad that we did to them. They did this to us because they are jealous of our success. Fanatical Muslims want to destroy our way of life. If we let them change our superior lifestyle, then the terrorists win. Don't let the terrorists win. Save America by going shopping, and leave the dispensing of the Islamo-fascists to the Commander-in-Chief, President Bush, and his military. We have nothing to fear but not being fearful enough, and here is a handy color-coded chart so you'll know exactly how fearful you should be. The basic message being that America once again is the victim of foreign aggression, but never again will we let this happen to us. It's all a matter of wrapping what we are seeking to sell in attractive packaging. The reason that post-traumatic shock and awe syndrome can persist for an entire lifetime is that the natural instinct is to avoid pain, to pretend that the painful event never happened, to try and bury the searing memories as deeply as possible in the subconscious and to cover them over. But the painful memories don't just disappear as intended, rather the memories sit and fester like an abscess. Always remember, denial may be just a river in Egypt, but denial is a full-time way of life in America. The beautiful thing is that as long as they remain emotionally and psychologically crippled, their hearts and minds will belong to us. We can expect unquestioning obedience. All we have to do is repeat the magic phrase, "Remember 9/11," and we will get whatever we desire.
If, in the future, a few activists manage to uncover the truth, and they ask the people to revisit the events of 9/11, and they beg the people to reconsider what really happened, the people will simply refuse to enter that dark and scary twilight zone of public mythology. The people won't want to rethink unhappy and painful events that would challenge their personal egos. We will take advantage of the same phenomenon that causes 2/3 of women who are raped to never report it, and the reason why 2/3 of the victims of fraud never seek redress. They will find themselves at odds with their own inflated self-image. They simply won't be willing to face the pain and humiliation of admitting that they'd been so violated or duped. I believe that people simply won't be able to get beyond their own self-pride. This is going to be fantastic. With Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden based in Afghanistan, it will be a snap for us to invade and occupy Afghanistan. Then there will be thousands of U.S. troops to effectively guard the building of the Trans-Afghan pipeline, to bring that $5 trillion worth of oil and natural gas in the Caspian region down to the Indian Ocean where tankers can take it to market, all justified under the pretext of hunting down Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We need to consider, how is our new phantom menace Osama bin Laden going to react to being accused of masterminding this attack? Osama will be perceived as the David that threw the rock that nailed Goliath where it really hurt. He will be revered by hundreds of millions of people. It is my understanding that he has become a very unreliable asset in recent years. If he denies involvement, no one will trust him anyway. But if we could have a statement or a video from him claiming responsibility, that would be a goldmine. What if we could find a Osama bin Laden look-alike and arrange to video him boasting to his friends of how the attack was even more successful than expected? That would make all red-blooded Americans seethe with rage. We should consider letting something happen to the original, but keep his persona alive through body doubles who will occasionally release threatening videos. In the aftermath of this PSYOPs event, I would be happy to write a new national security strategy of the United States. That would point out the obvious need to be more proactive in preempting future terrorist attacks, giving us the power to launch preemptive wars against any country that we suspect of aiding the terrorists or possibly supplying them with weapons of mass destruction. We can suggest that mushroom clouds will be rising up from American cities if we hesitate too long. First strike capability is what we have been dreaming of for years.
That bastard Saddam Hussein had a biological and nuclear weapons program, and he and Osama bin Laden are both Arab Muslims. If we could launch a convincing PR campaign to suggest Saddam Hussein is in bed with bin Laden, and that Saddam helped out with 9/11, maybe we could launch a preemptive war against Iraq. We need to protect our people from Saddam's nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, you know. No one will remember that Saddam fought a huge war against the Iranian Islamic fundamentalists with our help. We could market an invasion of Iraq as a brief defensive action and then construct permanent military bases. If we played our cards right, we could conceivably get 2 or 3 wars out of this psychops.
This is going to be magnificent. If we can gain control over 2 of the world's largest remaining oil reserves, we will command tremendous influence over all the nations that have no oil fields of their own. If they behave in a way that pleases us, we reward them with a carrot by selling them some oil. But if they displease us, we give them the stick by cutting off their oil supply, and we sit back and watch their economies wither. Of course, an invasion and occupation of Iraq could degrade into a quagmire, which would mean gigantic profits for Halliburton for many years to come. In Iraq, it would be easy to play the trusty old divide and conquer card. If we were to arrange to have special forces or other assets blow up Shia mosques, and then plant evidence that the Sunnis did it, and vice versa with Sunni mosques, it would be simple to rekindle ancient hatreds. They will turn on each other, saving us a lot of trouble. It would be like the Iran-Iraq War all over again, where we sold weapons to Saddam Hussein and to the mullahs in Iran. Ladies and gentlemen, as a result of mergers and acquisitions, the mass media has successfully been fully integrated into the corporate military-industrial complex, the practical outcome of which is that we can count on the mass media to be our cheerleaders for new wars. Given that their parent companies, General Electric and Westinghouse, made mountains of money selling weapons of mass destruction to the Pentagon during the Cold War, they now stand to make colossal profits selling new weapon systems to us to fight our worldwide war on terror. I will point out to their top executives that this war on terror will require many new weapon systems, and that we will be handing out trillions of dollars in defense contracts. Cooperation in creating and maintaining this new public myth will be rewarded generously. And of course, we can count on Rupert Murdoch's News Corp 100%. I will ensure that all news coverage is pre-scripted for maximum psychological effect. Even if someone on the inside cracks and decides to spill the beans to become a deep throat, there won't be any Woodward or Bernstein to report on it. All conspiracy nuts will be viciously attacked by the media or totally ignored. Of course, those of us involved in right-wing media intend to persist in emphasizing the useful public myth of a liberal media bias. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say that we have had a very successful strategy session today. We are on the threshold of the realization of our dream. In a few short years, we will see this brave new world order put on steroids. The great rulers of the past have revealed to us that there is a back door into the minds of our subjects, and the great rulers have given us the key that opens that door. There are many more details we have yet to work out in the next 32 months. Needless to say, put everything said here today into a compartment in your mind where it will remain concealed, especially from your public personas. This strategy and planning meeting for the Project for a New American Century now stands adjourned.
Oh boy.
In September of 2000, 1 year before the day that changed the world, the Project for a New American Century published on their website, The Rebuilding of America's Defenses, a document that publicly proclaimed their idea for a new Pearl Harbor, a catastrophic and catalyzing event. In order to more rapidly militarize the USA, there needed to be a terrifying new enemy. Philip Zelikow was selected to be part of Bush's transition team for the National Security Council. On September 10th, during the last peaceful day of terror-free living, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld called a press conference in the five-sided fortress. Today we are declaring a war on bureaucracy, not people but process. Our aim is to shift the Pentagon's resources from the tail to the tooth. I am declaring a war on waste. The money wasted by the military poses a serious threat. In fact, it could be said it's a matter of life and death. According to some estimates, we cannot track some $2.3 trillion in transactions. I promise to find out what went wrong and to reform the accounting system. But the next morning, the auditors whose job it is to follow the money were working at their computers in the newly remodeled Army Financial Management Audit Office. When, at 9:31, a powerful explosion tore through the west section of the Pentagon, there is a great deal of disagreement as to what caused the destruction. But there is agreement that the accountants suffered heavy casualties. What a fortunate thing to happen. Wonderful indeed from the perspective of those who stole, embezzled, pocketed those trillions. Suddenly Arab terrorists had provided the perfect distraction for generals and general contractors and Fortune 500 corporations. 9/11 and the war on terror opened the floodgates to allow additional hundreds of billions of dollars to flow through the Pentagon. Philip Zelikow was appointed to the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board a month after the September 11th operation. On October 7th, less than a month after September 11th, the Bush administration invaded and occupied Afghanistan, installing former UNICAL executive Ahmad Karzai as Afghanistan's puppet head of state. UNICAL has given up on building its Afghan pipeline because it would be very difficult to protect it from saboteurs who would associate disabling the 1,000-mile pipeline with ending the occupation of their country. An alternative route would be through Iran as the most economical route for a pipeline transporting Central Asian energy resources to international markets. Allow me to read the foreword of the 2002 National Security Strategy of the United States I have just written. While the United States will constantly strive to enlist the support of the international community, we will not hesitate to act alone if necessary, to exercise our right of self-defense by acting preemptively against such terrorists to prevent them from doing harm against our people and our country. As a matter of common sense and self-defense, America will act against such emerging threats before they become fully formed. We cannot defend America and our friends by hoping for the best. So we must be prepared to defeat our enemies' plans using the best intelligence and proceeding with deliberation. History will judge harshly those who saw the danger coming but failed to act. In the new world we have entered, the only path to peace and security is the path of action. This is the full 9/11 Commission, excluding of course the Commission's phantom member, Philip Zelikow, the expert on the creation and maintenance of public myths, who was appointed as Executive Director of the 9/11 investigation. As the Executive Director, it is my responsibility to lead the research staff. I decide what evidence the Commission sees. I'm the one responsible for framing the agenda, and best of all, as a member of the Commission, I have the power to delete anything I think may possibly threaten public presumptions from the final report. Let's see. The possible negative effects of multiple war games that were being conducted that day by the White House. Delete. Reports from eyewitnesses that felt and heard powerful explosions. Delete. Information that the fires in the Twin Towers are not very big, very hot, or very long-lasting compared with the fires in other steel-frame buildings that did not collapse. Delete. The fact that World Trade Center No. 7, which was not hit by an airplane and had only small, localized fires, also collapsed. Difficult to explain. Delete. Those Jersey girls demanded my resignation, questioning my neutrality and suggesting possible conflicts of interest in having a Bush administration insider as the executive director, but the president stood by my appointment and I refused to step down. The 9/11 Commission report goes so far as to suggest that the issue of who was financing the terrorists was irrelevant. On page 172 the report declares, "To date, the U.S. government has not been able to determine the origins of the money used for the 9/11 attacks. Ultimately, the question is of little practical significance." Imagine investigating a major crime and not following the money trail to find out who bankrolled it. The Commission failed to look into evidence that General Muhammad Ahmed, chief of Pakistan's military intelligence agency, who had meetings with his U.S. counterparts at the CIA and the Pentagon during the week prior to September 11th, had ordered $100,000 to be sent to Muhammad Atta just prior to 9/11. The report failed to inquire into a report that the Bush administration pressured Pakistan to dismiss Ahmed as ISI chief after the appearance of the story that he had ordered ISI money sent to Atta.